Sometimes you have to test someone to see if they really love you, right? I mean, that's what I kept telling myself when I suggested the open marriage thing to Dale. Look, I'm not some naive little housewife. I work at a gentleman's club downtown, and I've always been upfront about that. Dale knew what he was getting when he married me. But lately, he'd been acting all weird and distant about my job, making these passive aggressive comments about finding something more stable for Mason's sake. Our 6 year old son was perfectly fine, by the way. Dale was just being his usual uptight self. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy hearing about real relationship drama. And don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. Trust me, this story gets wild. So there I was, 28 years old, married to this 30-year-old man who acted like he was 45 half the time. Dale worked some office job that he never really talked about. Something with computers or paperwork. I don't know. The point is, he was always stressed about money and constantly nagging me about my career choices. He'd make these little digs about how the other dads at Mason's school probably wondered what kind of mother I was. Like, excuse me, I made good money. I was home during the day with our son, and I kept myself in amazing shape. What more did he want? The breaking point came after this huge fight he had on a Tuesday night. Dale had come home from work all pissy again. And when I mentioned that one of my regulars had tipped me really well that evening, he just lost it. Started going on about how uncomfortable it made him that strange men were paying to look at me, how it wasn't appropriate for a mother, all that judgmental garbage. I'm standing there in our kitchen, still in my workout clothes because I just gotten back from the gym, and this man is lecturing me about appropriateness. You know what your problem is, Dale? I said, getting right in his face. You're not secure enough in yourself to handle having a wife that other men want. That's not my issue to fix. He went quiet for a minute, which was typical. Dale always shut down when he couldn't win an argument with logic. Then he said something that really got under my skin. Maybe we're just not compatible anymore, Allison. Compatible. We had a kid together. We'd been married for 4 years, and now he wanted to talk about compatibility because he couldn't handle my job. I spent the next few days thinking about what he'd said, and that's when I came up with my brilliant plan. If Dale wanted to question our compatibility, I'd give him a real test. I'd suggest opening up our marriage and see how he handled that. Either he'd realize how good he had it with me, or he'd show his true colors and prove he never really loved me the way I deserved. The conversation happened on a Friday night after Mason was in bed. I'd been planning what to say all week, and I was ready. Dale was sitting on the couch watching some stupid documentary about World War II or something equally mind-numbing. We need to talk, I said, turning off the TV. He looked up at me with those tired brown eyes of his. Dale wasn't ugly. I'll give him that. He was decent looking in a basic way, average height, kept himself in okay shape, had all his hair, but there was something about him that just screamed safe choice to me. Maybe that's why I'd married him in the first place. After dating a string of guys who were exciting but unreliable, Dale seemed like the responsible option. Now I was wondering if responsible was just another word for weak. What's on your mind? He asked. Pausing his show, I sat down across from him, not next to him. I wanted to see his face for this. I've been thinking about what you said the other night about compatibility. Okay, here's the thing, Dale. I love you, but I don't think one man is ever going to fully satisfy me sexually. I mean, I watched his expression carefully. I'm thinking we should consider opening up our marriage. The look on his face was priceless. Not shock exactly, more like he was processing something he'd been expecting. That should have been my first red flag, but I was too focused on making my point. Sana, you want to sleep with other people, he said slowly. I want us both to have the freedom to explore. No secrets, no lying, just honest communication about our needs. I leaned forward. Look, we're both adults. We both have needs. Maybe it's time we stop pretending that monogamy is realistic for everyone. Dale was quiet for a long time, like uncomfortably long. I started to wonder if I'd broken his brain or something. You've already thought about this a lot, he finally said. I have, and I think it could actually strengthen our relationship if we approach it the right way. What does the right way look like to you? This was going better than I'd expected. I'd thought he'd immediately start yelling or crying or something equally pathetic. Instead, he seemed genuinely curious about the logistics. Maybe Dale had more of a backbone than I'd given him credit for. We'd need rules, I said. Boundaries like no one from our past. That could get messy. No bringing people to our house where Mason might see. Family always comes first, so we don't let this interfere with our responsibilities as parents. And we're honest with each other about what we're doing. Honest about what exactly? Well, not every detail. That would be weird, but like, if you ask me directly about something, I won't lie to you. Dale nodded slowly. And you've really thought this through, all the potential consequences. I have. Look, I know it's not conventional, but neither is our relationship. I work in an industry where I'm constantly around attractive people who are interested in me. You work in an office where you barely interact with women. This could level the playing field. That last part wasn't entirely true. Dale actually worked with plenty of women, and I'd noticed how some of them looked at him at company parties. There was this one woman, Noelle, who worked in the legal department or something, who always seemed a little too friendly when she talked to him. But I wasn't about to admit that I'd noticed other women finding my husband attractive. That would undermine my whole argument. I need time to think about this, Dale said. Of course. Take all the time you need. But inside, I was already planning my first encounter. There was this guy, Reed, who came into the club pretty regularly. He was 32, worked in construction, and had been flirting with me for months. He wasn't the type I'd usually go for. Too much muscle, too many tattoos, definitely not husband material. But for what I had in mind, he'd be perfect. Reed was the kind of guy who could make me feel desired in a way that Dale never could. Dale was too careful, too considerate. Sometimes a woman wants to feel like she's driving a man crazy with lust. Dale spent the whole weekend thinking it over, which was typical. The man couldn't order pizza without weighing the pros and cons for 20 minutes. But on Sunday night, he surprised me. Okay, he said while we were getting ready for bed. Let's try it. Really? With conditions. We both agreed to the rules you mentioned. We're careful about protection and health, and if either of us wants to stop, we stop immediately. I tried to hide my excitement. That sounds fair. And Allison, if we do this, we're both free to explore that, not just you. Of course, I said, though. The thought of Dale actually finding someone willing to sleep with him seemed pretty unlikely. I mean, he was fine, but he wasn't exactly the type to sweep women off their feet. He'd probably spend months working up the courage to even talk to someone, and by then, I'd be ready to close things up anyway. The next week, I reached out to Reed through Instagram. I'd been careful about social media since marrying Dale. I kept my posts pretty tame and never responded to the more obvious come-ons from guys who followed me, but now I had permission to change that. Hey, stranger, I messaged him. Been thinking about our conversation last week. Maybe we should grab coffee sometime and continue it in private. He responded within an hour. I was wondering when you'd finally message me. When and where? We met at a hotel bar on Thursday night. I'd told Dale I was meeting a girlfriend for drinks, which technically wasn't a lie since I hadn't specified which friend or what kind of drinks. Reed looked even better outside the club. Cleaned up, wearing actual clothes instead of the business casual stuff most of my customers wore. We talked for about an hour, mostly about surface level stuff, but the tension was obvious. He kept looking at me like he wanted to devour me right there in the hotel lobby. So, he finally said, are we going to keep pretending this is just a friendly drink? I have a room upstairs, I said. The sex was exactly what I'd been craving. Reed was aggressive in all the right ways, confident, focused entirely on his own pleasure in a way that was actually incredibly satisfying. With Dale, everything was always about making sure I was comfortable, asking if I liked what he was doing, checking in constantly. It was sweet, but sometimes you don't want sweet. Sometimes you want to be wanted so badly that the other person can't control themselves. Afterward, while Reed was in the bathroom, I felt this weird mix of satisfaction and guilt. The satisfaction made sense. I'd gotten exactly what I wanted. The guilt was unexpected. I'd been given permission for this, so why did I feel like I'd done something wrong? When I got home around midnight, Dale was still awake, reading in bed. He looked up when I walked in, and I expected questions or accusations, or at least some kind of reaction. Instead, he just said, "How was your evening?" "Fine," I said, heading toward the bathroom. "I'm going to shower." "Okay, sleep well." That was it. I just spent 3 hours in a hotel room with another man, and Dale's only response was, "Sleep well." Part of me was relieved, but another part was almost insulted. Shouldn't he be at least a little jealous? A little curious about what I'd been doing. The next morning, Dale was already up making coffee when I came downstairs. Mason was eating cereal at the kitchen table, chattering about something that had happened at school the day before. "Morning," Dale said, handing me a mug. "Morning." We sat down with Mason, and Dale helped him with his math homework while I scrolled through my phone. It was all so normal, so domestic, like nothing had changed at all. I found myself studying Dale's face, looking for signs that he was upset or bothered or even thinking about what I'd done the night before. Nothing. "I might go out again next week," I said casually. "Okay," Dale replied, not looking up from Mason's worksheet. "Just let me know when so I can plan accordingly." That should have been the end of it. I'd gotten what I wanted. Permission to explore outside my marriage without consequences. But Dale's complete lack of reaction was starting to bother me. It was like he didn't care what I did, which wasn't the response I'd been hoping for. I wanted him to be a little jealous, a little possessive. I wanted him to fight for me. Instead, he seemed almost relieved. The following Tuesday, Dale mentioned that he was thinking about taking advantage of our arrangement as well. "There's someone I might ask out," he said while we were cleaning up after dinner. I felt my stomach drop. "Oh, just someone from work. We've been talking more lately, and I think there might be mutual interest." "What's her name?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Noelle. She's recently divorced, so she's not looking for anything serious. Seems like it could be a good fit for what we're trying to do." Noelle, the woman from his company parties who always laughed a little too hard at Dale's jokes, the one with the perfect blonde hair and the law degree, and the way of looking at my husband like he was the most interesting man in the room. I hated her immediately. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" I asked. "Mixing work and personal stuff can get complicated. You said no one from our past, but you didn't say anything about coworkers." He was right, technically, but I'd assumed Dale would have trouble finding anyone willing to sleep with him, let alone someone I already knew and disliked. "I just think you should be careful," I said. "You don't want to make things weird at your job." "I appreciate the concern, but I think I can handle it." There was something different about the way Dale was talking to me. More confident, less apologetic. It was like my suggestion had flipped some kind of switch in him, and I wasn't sure I liked this new version of my husband. "When are you planning to ask her out?" "Tomorrow. Tomorrow, probably. We're having lunch anyway to discuss a project, so I'll see how it goes." I spent the next day obsessing over what Dale might be doing with Noel. Were they really talking about work, or was he charming her with that dry sense of humor that had attracted me to him in the first place? Was she flirting back? Was she better at it than I was? When Dale came home that evening, he seemed pleased with himself. "How did lunch go?" I asked, trying to sound disinterested. "Really? Well, we're getting dinner on Saturday." "Dinner?" "Yeah, she suggested this Italian place downtown. Should be nice." I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't how it was supposed to work. Dale was supposed to be grateful for my honesty and openness, not immediately running off with some divorce lawyer who probably saw him as a stable rebound. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" I asked. "I mean, you've never done anything like this before." "Neither had you, until last week." "That's different. I work around attractive people all the time. I'm used to handling that kind of attention. And now I get to learn how to handle it too." The way he said it made me want to slap him. Where was the insecure, anxious man I'd married? Where was the guy who used to ask me 3 times if I really found him attractive? This new Dale was starting to piss me off. Saturday came too quickly. Dale spent an hour getting ready, which was more effort than I'd seen him put into his appearance in years. He wore the navy button-down I'd bought him for his birthday, the one that made his eyes look greener. He even used the expensive cologne I'd given him for Christmas. You look nice, I said when he came downstairs. Thanks. I should be back by 10 or 11. Have fun, I managed to say. After he left, I put Mason to bed and then spent the evening stalking Noel's social media profiles. She was 31, graduated from a decent law school, had been married for 6 years before her divorce was finalized 8 months ago. She posted pictures of herself hiking, traveling, reading books. She looked like the kind of woman who had her life together, who knew what she wanted and went after it. She was everything I wasn't. And I hated that I'd basically handed my husband to her on a silver platter. Dale came home just after 10:30, and I could tell immediately that the date had gone well. He had this satisfied, slightly dazed expression that I recognized from our early dating days, the look of a man who'd been thoroughly charmed by an attractive woman. "How was dinner?" I asked. "Great, really great. Noelle is. She's really interesting to talk to." "Interesting. How?" "Just smart, funny, easy to be around." He paused. "We're going out again next Friday." I felt something inside me crack. This wasn't supposed to happen. Dale wasn't supposed to find someone he actually liked. He was supposed to have a few awkward encounters that made him appreciate what he had at home. "Next Friday is Mason's school play," I said. "The play is at 7. We're meeting for drinks after." "So, you're just going to rush out of our son's performance to go hook up with some woman?" Dale's expression hardened. "First of all, I'm not rushing out of anything. The play will be over by 8:30, and Mason will be tired anyway. Second, you're the one who suggested we open up our marriage. You don't get to be upset when I actually participate." "I'm not upset. I just think you're moving pretty fast with this Noel person. As fast as you moved with whoever you were with last week." I didn't have an answer for that. He was right, and I hated it. The next few weeks were torture. Dale went out with Noel twice more, and each time he came home looking more confident and relaxed than I'd seen him in months. Meanwhile, I'd met up with Reed a couple more times, but the thrill was wearing off. The sex was still good, but I kept finding myself comparing him to Dale. Reed was selfish in bed, only concerned with his own satisfaction. Dale had always made sure I enjoyed myself, even when I was too tired or distracted to really be present. But what really bothered me was how much Dale seemed to be enjoying his time with Noel. He started working out more, bought new clothes, even got a better haircut. It was like he was becoming the man I'd always wanted him to be, except he was doing it for someone else. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in November. Dale had just gotten back from another date with Noel, and I couldn't take it anymore. "We need to talk about closing this up," I said as soon as he walked in the door. "Closing what up?" "The open marriage thing. I think we've both gotten what we needed from it, and now it's time to focus on our family again." Dale stared at me for a long moment. "You want to close it now?" "Yes. I think it's run its course. Right after I've started seeing someone regularly, but after you've had several encounters with your guy." "This isn't about timing, Dale. This is about what's best for our marriage." "Our marriage?" he repeated slowly. "The marriage where you told me that one man could never fully satisfy you. That marriage." I was just being honest about my needs. And now you're being honest about your need to control when I get to explore mine. I felt my temper flare. "Don't turn this around on me. I'm trying to save our relationship here by ending it the moment I start enjoying myself." "And you're enjoying yourself a little too much, don't you think? You're acting like a completely different person." "Maybe I am a different person. Maybe this whole experience has shown me things about myself that I never knew before." "Like what?" "Like the fact that I'm tired of being taken for granted. Like the fact that there are women out there who actually appreciate me instead of just tolerating me." That stung. "I don't just tolerate you. Don't you? When's the last time you initiated sex with me? When's the last time you seemed genuinely happy to see me when I came home from work? When's the last time you talked about me like I was someone you were proud to be married to?" I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out, because he was right and we both knew it. "I'm not closing this arrangement, Allison. Not yet. You wanted honesty and openness, and that's what you're getting. So? So what? You're just going to keep seeing this woman indefinitely?" I'm going to keep seeing her as long as we're both enjoying each other's company, just like you're free to keep seeing whoever you've been meeting up with. I already stopped seeing him. Why? Because he bored me. Because all he wanted was sex. And I realized I actually missed having conversations with someone who knew me. Because I missed you, I thought, but didn't say. Because I realized it wasn't what I really wanted. Well, I'm still figuring out what I want, and until I do, this stays open. That night, I lay in bed, listening to Dale's steady breathing and feeling like I'd lost something important. The man sleeping next to me was still my husband, still the father of my child. But he wasn't the same person I'd married. That Dale had been eager to please, anxious about losing me, willing to overlook my flaws because he thought I was out of his league. This new Dale didn't seem to think I was out of his league at all. In fact, he seemed to think he might be out of mine. The holidays were awkward. Dale still went through all the motions of being a devoted husband and father, but there was a distance between us that hadn't been there before. He was polite, considerate, but not particularly warm. It was like living with a roommate who happened to share my bed. He continued seeing Noel throughout December and January. I tried to convince myself that it was just a phase, that eventually he'd get bored with her and come back to me. But Dale seemed happier than he'd been in years. He laughed more, smiled more, had more energy. He was becoming the man I'd always wanted him to be. Except, I was no longer the woman inspiring that change. In February, everything fell apart. I was going through Dale's phone while he was in the shower, not because I suspected him of lying, but because I needed to know what he and Noel were saying to each other. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. They weren't just sleeping together. They were falling in love. The text messages between them were full of inside jokes, thoughtful observations, genuine affection. Dale wrote to her the way he used to write to me when we were first dating before marriage and parenthood, and my job had complicated everything. Reading their conversations was like watching my husband fall for someone else in real time. But what really destroyed me was a message Dale had sent her the week before. I think I'm ready to make some big changes in my life. This situation with Allison isn't sustainable long term, and I owe it to myself and Mason to figure out what I really want. He was planning to leave me. My brilliant plan to test his devotion had backfired so completely that I was about to lose everything. I confronted him that night after Mason went to bed. "I saw your texts with Noel," I said. Dale didn't even look surprised. "Okay. You're planning to leave me for her. I'm planning to figure out what makes me happy. If that means ending our marriage, then yes." "What about Mason? What about our family?" "Mason will be fine. Kids are resilient, and he'll be better off with parents who are actually happy instead of just going through the motions." "I can make you happy, Dale. I know I've made mistakes, but I can change." "Can you?" Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you only want to change now that you're losing control of the situation. He was right again, and I hated him for it. So what? You're just going to throw away 4 years of marriage for some rebound relationship? I'm going to stop pretending that we're compatible when we're clearly not. You said it yourself. One man will never be enough to satisfy you. Well, one woman like you will never be enough to make me feel valued. That was the moment I realized I'd lost him completely. The Dale I'd married would never have said something so cutting, so final. This new version of my husband had learned to stand up for himself, and I was the casualty of that education. The divorce proceedings started in March. Dale had been planning this for months. It turned out he'd consulted with lawyers, documented our financial situation, even started looking for his own apartment. The man I thought was too weak to handle an open marriage had been orchestrating his escape the entire time. The custody battle was brutal. Dale's lawyer, who turned out to be a colleague of Noel's, painted me as an unfit mother whose lifestyle and poor judgment made me unsuitable for primary custody. They brought up my job, my suggestion to open the marriage, even the fact that I'd been the one to initiate contact with other men. Everything I'd thought was evidence of my honesty and sexual liberation was reframed as proof of my instability. I tried to fight back, tried to paint Dale as a manipulative liar who'd tricked me into giving him permission to cheat, But the text messages between us told a different story. I was the one who'd suggested the arrangement. I was the one who'd set the rules. I was the one who'd insisted that we both had the right to explore other relationships. The judge wasn't impressed with my arguments. Dale was awarded primary custody of Mason, with me getting alternate weekends and one evening per week. The house was sold, and we split the proceeds. I moved into a small apartment across town and had to find a new job because the scandal of the divorce had made my position at the club untenable. Apparently, even exotic dancers have their limits when it comes to drama. 2 years have passed since the divorce was finalized. Dale married Noelle last spring in a small ceremony that Mason was excited to be part of. They bought a house in the suburbs with a big backyard and a dog. Mason talks about his stepmother constantly during our visits, how she helps him with his homework, how she taught him to ride a bike, how she makes the best pancakes. I should be happy that my son has a stable home environment. I should be grateful that Dale found someone who makes him happy. But mostly, I just feel bitter about how everything turned out. The truth is, I never expected Dale to actually go through with the open marriage. I thought he'd either refuse outright, proving that he was too controlling and insecure to handle my needs, or agree reluctantly and then fail to find anyone interested in him. Either way, I'd planned to use his response as evidence that we weren't compatible, that I needed more than he could give me. Instead, Dale had called my bluff in the most devastating way possible. He'd shown me that he was perfectly capable of attracting other women, that he was more interesting and desirable than I'd given him credit for, and that he didn't need me as much as I'd assumed he did. I tested his love, and he'd failed the test by proving that his love had limits, that it was conditional on being treated with respect and appreciation, that it could be transferred to someone else if I didn't value it properly. The worst part is that I can't even blame him for leaving. When I'm being completely honest with myself, I know that I took him for granted. I know that I used his devotion against him, assuming he'd always be there, no matter how I treated him. I know that I suggested the open marriage not out of genuine sexual need, but out of a desire to prove my own desirability and his inadequacy. But knowing all of that doesn't make it easier to accept the consequences. It doesn't make it easier to see my son every other weekend instead of every day. It doesn't make it easier to watch Dale build a life with someone else, someone who appreciates what I threw away. Sometimes I wonder, what would have happened if I'd never suggested opening our marriage? If I just talked to Dale about feeling unappreciated, instead of testing his commitment in such a destructive way, maybe we could have worked things out. Maybe we could have found a way to reconnect without involving other people. But then I remember how relieved Dale looked when I first brought up the idea. How quickly he'd agreed to my terms. How easily he'd found someone else to care about. Maybe our marriage was already over, and the open relationship was just the catalyst that made it obvious. Either way, I'm the one who lit the match that burned down my family. If this confession kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We share powerful true stories every day that explore the complex realities of life.